everybody. Can y'all hear me? Cool. I am HM1 Ellis. I work at Naval Medical Force Atlantic. That's up with the Admiral, and I basically just deploy people. So I am kind of like the devil. But if anybody would like to go on an IA deployment, please just. My name's Amanda Ellis. There's 18 of us. I'm number 18. So just shoot me an email and I can send you to Gitmo or Djibouti or Bahrain maybe. What's up?
Does that cover like other command, like pre-coms and all that?
It's just BSO 18. I'm sorry. I can only take people from BSO 18. So if you're at the hospital or one of the clinics, yeah. All right. Anyway, we're gonna go over Decedent Affairs. Who's seen this on an exam before? Yeah, pretty much every exam. Even though it's healthcare administration, and you know that was like one of the small topics, it's gonna be on there. It's always on every single test I've ever taken, Decedent Affairs. All right, so it's chapter 25. All right. I kind of just broke down the chapter and made this PowerPoint myself, so I'm just going to go over the highlighted points and what I've seen on the text. So I've seen questions about who is the overall manager of Decedent Affairs, and that is the Navy Casualty and Navy Mortuary Affairs, which is located in Millington, Tennessee. So, you know, you're going to see other answers, but just remember Navy Casualty and Navy Mortuary Affairs.
That question is on almost every exam I've seen with Decedent Affairs.
Yes. You go back. Oh, I'm sorry. Sure.
And they'll throw a lot of answers that sound like the right answer on there. They'll say CNO or CMC and stuff like that. So know exactly which, they'll even use different regions on there. So.
All right, and then the Secretary of the Navy delegates administrative responsibilities via the CNO, the Chief of UMED, or the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and then the COs. So if it says CMC on there, it depends how they bring it out, but CMC could also mean Commandant of the Marine Corps, so keep that in mind.
I'll be honest with you, I don't think on a single advanced exam, Command Master Chief was an answer. So just know CMC on the advanced exam is Commandant of the Marine Corps. Unless you guys have seen it, I've never seen Command Master Chief on a test.
No, I don't think so. Everybody good? All right, there are 5 programs in the Decedent Affairs. We got the Current Death Program, the Graves Registration Program, the Concurrent Return Program, the Return of Remains Program, and then the Casualty Assistant Calls Program, which is kind of not part of Decedent Affairs, but they listed it in the Corps Manual as such, so we're still going to go over it. All right, so the Current Death Program. This is a program that provides professional mortuary services, supplies, care, and disposition of remains. Round-trip transportation for the family members of deceased active duty member to the burial site. Remains are shipped to a place designated by the primary next of kin, and for permitted disposition. It is operational worldwide, only in peacetime. So the Current Death Program is only used in peacetime. Huh? Everybody still right now? Alright, the next program, the Graves Registration Program. This one is the search, recovery, and evacuation, identification, disposition of personal effects, burial of deceased in a temporary cemetery. So this is going to be during operational commitments when there's a major military operation. They're going to use the Graves Registration Program because it's temporary. So they're not going to bring that body back. They're just going to put it in a temporary grave until they can. This includes the establishment and maintenance of a temporary burial site. So you got concurrent, bring the body, put them in the grave. Graves, temporary grave. Now the Concurrent Death Program. This is a combination of the Current Death Program and the Graves Registration Program. So they're just a combo of them both. This is activated during emergencies or major military operations when conditions permit.
So to make that make sense, right? We'll use like World War II as an example. Okay, during World War II, you could not have the what's it called, the current death program initiated because it was not safe to try to get those bodies out of there back to the States, right? So they would be using the graves registration just to set up temporary cemeteries. Well, once the war is over, they want to go ahead and get these guys back to where they need to be. So then they fall under the concurrent death program where they would take these casualties from the temporary cemeteries and fall back under the current death where we're putting them to where they're either the VA cemetery or close to where they are from home and stuff like that. Does that make sense to y'all?
All right, and the Return and Remain program. This is activated under enactment of special legislation. UMED is responsible for field activities of its activation. This provides for permanent disposition of remains of those persons buried in temporary cemeteries. It gives the primary next of kin the option to leave remains buried there or ship it to another place. So this is activated under special legislation. I've seen that before. And the last one, Casualty Assistant Call Program. This is related but not a part of the Season Affairs program. The CACO, you guys heard of a CACO before? The Casualty Assistant Calls Officer. It's going to be someone who helps the next of kin, and then that PAD, which is the person authorized direct disposition, so the person in charge of like your body and everything. The CACO helps them with what to do with you. The disposition of remains, any unpaid allowances, the shipment of all your personal stuff, your SGLI, the settlement of the decedent's estate, the VA survivor benefits, household goods, medical care, commissary and exchange privileges, employment and education. They're pretty much just like right next to your next of kin or your PAD and helping them, get through it and get all the benefits that they're supposed to be getting.
No, it's not on this slide, but it should be. The overall manager of the CACP is different from your Decedent Affairs. It's going to be your Commandant of the Marine Corps and I think CNO is in charge of this program. So you have the Mortuary Affairs in charge of Decedent Affairs. You have the Commandant of the Marine Corps and the CNO in charge of the CACP program.
Okay. The CACO will contact the next of kin between the hours of 05 and 2400, unless one of the following has occurred, and that's death occurred in theater during the war, if there's high media interest, or otherwise directed by the regional commander. I've definitely seen that on the test before, the hours, the 05 to 2400. And then I've also seen how long the CACO is assigned to that member of your family or your next of kin or your PAD. So it's from 90 days, and then they're going to help them out all the way till 9 months. So they're there for a while. Any questions? Okay. All right, Decedent Affairs program. When a death occurs within CONUS, so in the United States, it is the responsibility of the member's commanding officer to make sure that the personal notification is made to the next of kin or the PAD. When it's OCONUS, a death is OCONUS outside the United States, the individual's command shall follow the Navy Personnel Command. They follow whatever NAVPER says. The CO is required to write a letter, a condolence letter, to the next of kin within 48 hours. So they have 48 hours to write, a letter, and I'm sorry, and all that stuff.
Pay attention to that. So the CO has 3 different responsibilities in this manual with hours. So pay attention to what it's talking about so you don't mix up those. For instance, she'll go over a casualty report where he has to submit one every 4 hours. There's the 48 hours here one, and I think there's one other one. So just don't mix those 3 up when you're studying this chapter.
All right. Yep, so 48 hours for that letter. Okay, here's the other hours we're talking about here. So search and recovery, when somebody goes missing. When search and recovery operations continue for more than 36 hours, so when it's been, 36 hours, I don't know what it is. Chronological progress reports should be dispatched every 24 hours to BUMED and to the Navy Casualty Office, with the appropriate addressees directed by the Decedent Affairs Instruction, which is NAVMED Common Instruction 5360. Yeah, so when you see those news articles about the planes, crashing in the sea and they're searching for people, they're gonna, if they're going for more than 36 hours, then every 24 hours, or after that, a report is gonna be sent to BUMED and the Navy Casualty Office. Annual contracts. An annual contract is awarded to the funeral director serving the local area of activities anticipating 3 or more deaths per year. So basically what this is saying is if there's a command and they're anticipating, 3 or more deaths, they're gonna have like a contract with one of the funeral companies around, and that's what they use. They'll use that company if they anticipate 3 or more deaths. And then there's the one-time contracts issued by an activity to a funeral home when an annual contract is not in effect. So you got your annual contracts, it's 3 or more deaths. One-time contracts, you don't have any contract. Okay, expenses. It's always on the test. Primary versus secondary. Primary has anything to do with the body, and then secondary is everything else. So, primary. Expenses incurred in connection with the recovery, preparation, encasement, and burials of the remains. So cremating, getting the body dressed, the type of clothing you're gonna wear, the casket, the embalmment, delivery of the remains. And then secondary is gonna be like flowers, the grave site, the clergymen, the people working the church, the obituaries, opening and closing of the grave, digging the hole and stuff, who's gonna pay them. It's all secondary expenses.
So easy way to remember it is primary is going to be body prep, and secondary is just going to be funeral and anything that involves the funeral, if that makes sense. So flowers is usually one they like to throw on there to throw you off. Flowers will always be a secondary expense because it's involved with the funeral.
Yeah. Preparation and processing of remains. I've seen this on the test a lot about the temperature, and I've seen it in Fahrenheit and in Celsius. So the body may be refrigerated for short periods of time to minimize cellular deterioration. It should be refrigerated above the freezing point, so from 36 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And then also know this in Celsius, 2.2 to 4.4. Caskets. This is the sizing. I've seen this a lot on the test too. So you got your standard casket, 23 by 78, and your oversized casket, 25 by 81. So you got a good couple inches in between the standard and the oversized. Each casket is an 18 gauge silver tone metal sealer with a cut top. And the COs who receive requests for at-sea disposition of remains or cremains will forward the request to the appropriate fleet commander in chief, the scenic, and requested port of embarkation. I always see message traffic with burial at sea. So this is something that the COs have to request, and then they have to request to the fleet commander in chief, the scenic. I definitely see that on the test. The CNIC, that was the answer, for burials at sea. Contagious or communicable disease victims. This is when, somebody dies of a sickness that's very contagious, so, you don't want to spread it and touch the body and all that stuff, so They're gonna get transferred in a case or casket, must be closed immediately. And a gummy, I think it's like, what's it called, gum? I don't know.
I'm supposed to say gummed.
A gum, sticker, 2x4 label, is marked contagious and affixed to the outside of the casket at the head. I've definitely seen that on the test, like where's the sticker placed, and it's gotta be at the head. On the outside of the casket, 2x4, says contagious. Yeah? Escorts. Escorts are provided to accompany the remains to ensure prompt, safe delivery as a mark of respect to the decedent and as an indication of the Navy's desire to help the next of kin. Escorts, they should be the same branch of service, the same status and pay grade of the deceased. It's recommended that they're from the same unit and within the same religion. The escort's gonna be, seeing this person's family, so you wanna make sure that person, has some good things to say and they're the right person to just be with that family. The activity making the arrangements is responsible to provide the escort. Navy Mortuary Affairs should approve a special escort to accompany remains on an AMC aircraft from Oconus to Conus. I've seen this on the test. A maximum of one escort may serve as an escort to remains at one time. So one escort at a time, just one.
Also remember, what uniform is the standard uniform for a person to be buried in? Service dress blues. Service dress blues is the uniform that they're supposed to be buried in. It can be requested from something else, so I see some confused looks. Your PNOK can request something else, but the standard default is your Navy service dress blue.
Okay. These are all the forms. I'll give you guys a minute if you want to write them down, but you got your DD form 2062 and 63, which is your CONUS and OCONUS, preparation and disposition of remains. You got your DD form 2064, your certificate of death. Your DD form 565, which is the statement of recognition of deceased, received from the primary next of kin and civil authorities. You got your DD form 2065, disposition of remains, reimbursable basis. Your DD form 1375, request of payment of funeral and interment expenses. And then the NAV sub form 29, the personal inventory of a deceased service member. I've seen a question about this NAV sub form 29, because there's an inventory board of all your stuff. 2 members on this board, for the decedent's belongings. One has to be a commissioned officer, and these people that are on this inventory board for all your stuff, taking inventory, they're appointed by the CO. Know the difference between 2062, the 2063, and the 2064. OCONUS, CONUS, and then just a certificate of death. And remains transferred from overseas to CONUS require 2 copies of the 2064 and 2 of the DD 565.
It's 3 copies. So it's 3 copies of the 2064 and 2 copies of the 565.
You got 3 types of cemeteries. Your national cemeteries, you got your open, closed, and your new. These are pretty much what they're saying, a new cemetery, except, has space available with graves. Closed one, it's closed, can't fit anybody in there. And a new is a cemetery plan, but not yet open, inactive. Okay, these are just some of the things I added to this slide that I've seen on the test before from the chapter. So we got the VA is responsible for providing a headstone marking from personnel serving on active duty at the time of their death. So the headstone is the VA is responsible for, the Veteran Administration. If a death occurs overseas without a naval activity present, the nearest consulate office should be requested to obtain a death certificate. So if this person died and they're nowhere near a base, the nearest consulate office should be requested to do the death certificate. Another one I've seen on the test with automobile accidents and people dying. An automobile accident is an instance when an autopsy is under the discretion of the medical examiner. So it's up to who's ever examining the body to request if there should be an autopsy or not. The medical officer recommends to the CO an autopsy should be performed on an aircrew member. The PAD will pay for a private autopsy if it's not recommended by the medical examiner. PAD pays for private autopsy when the local jurisdiction has determined that an autopsy is not necessary. So if authorities are saying they don't need one, or the Navy is saying like, no, they don't need an autopsy, but the PAD's like, I want one, they're gonna have to pay for it. Everybody knows what a PAD is, right? Okay. A PAD, it's a, what's this?
You know the term, but do you know what that person does? No, it's your person authorized direct disposition. So they're the primary person when you die, that they are the one that are going to figure out what happens with your remains. So when they say on your page 2 to update who your PAD's going to be, say you die, they're the first person that's contacted to figure out what to do with your body. And they coordinate all of that.
If you don't know what that is, you need to go into your INSIPs now and make sure you click on one of those people to be your PAD, whoever you have in there. You know, your parents are in there, or your spouse or your family. Make sure you go do that. It's right in the red DA, I believe. Yeah. Okay. Personal casualty report of cases that are pending identification will be in a duty status of DUST 1. Duty status whereabout is unknown. So if they can't tell whose finger or leg or something they found, or they don't know what happened to your body, it's duty status of DUST 1. DUSTWUN. Okay, other than the 50, I've seen this on the test too. Other than the 50 states and the District of Columbia, a certificate of death overseas is not required to be prepared. So you don't use the overseas death certificate for that. And then Arlington's, I've just seen this on the HMC exam. Arlington Cemetery, you know, the big cemetery that you see, you know, in pictures and stuff in DC. It's owned by the Army. It is not owned by the VA. It's owned by the U.S. Army.
Another one that's on the test that's not mentioned here, maybe one of y'all can help me remember it all the way. It's talking about if a service member is in the middle of a PCS and they die, who has ownership of that deceased? Is it the transferring command, the gaining command? Does anybody remember that question? It is the transferring command. But that question has popped up on the test at least a couple times with that PCS type situation.
Anybody have any questions? No? Alright, just a few tips from when I used to take the exam. I was a really big fan of YouTube, and his name was Robert Blakesley. I don't know if you guys heard of him. I live in Hampton, so driving here is a little bit of a drive, but I would just put him on my, YouTube and when I'm driving for a good 30 minutes and just listen to his YouTube videos.